Hello, hello.
Hello.
I am Brandy, and this is Richard, and we are Emerge by Design. And we wanted to come on today and talk about the Scorpio new moon.
Happening on Friday,
Yes,
November 1st, 6:47 a.m. Mountain Time.
6:47 a.m.
hmm
But before we do that, maybe I'm going to shamelessly plug our next new creation that
Sure.
we have been working on. We are creating or have created a planets workshop. This planets, well, more than a workshop, it's a journey. It's a 9-week journey into each and every placement, planet, archetype, and aspect, or planet human design gate and aspect in your natal astrology wheel.
hmm
We are going to get to know them like they are members of a dinner party, like they are invited guests. And we are going to get to know how they play out in our design and in our lives around us, how they relate to one another, and how that shows up in our life with their hero's journey within ours.
hmm
Yeah. So it starts
On December,
15th
yep.
on Sundays. It will be a Sunday morning delight,
hmm
10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, and it will be for 9 weeks. And we're excited.
hmm
Yeah.
We're going to learn about how our human design mechanics meet our astrological mythology. It's going
Yes,
to be very exciting self-exploration into these
absolutely.
archetypes. So hope to join us there.
So
Yes.
now we are going to talk about this new moon in Scorpio.
Yes, this new moon in Scorpio. Now, let's pause for a minute and think about this last lunar month that we've just gone through.
Hmm.
We had a new moon in Libra last month.
Okay.
And so relationships were most likely part of the conversation out there in the world,
Hmm.
learning how to find ourselves in relationship with the other.
Yeah.
But we're moving into the sign of Scorpio for this new moon. And Scorpio is fixed water, the deep within the deep,
Yeah.
as I like to call it. In fact, when I think about Scorpio, the image that always comes to mind is looking out over the ocean at night with the
Yeah.
moonlight and how mystical and beautiful it
Hmm.
is. It's also a little bit scary
You don't
because you
know
can
what's there.
imagine there's a whole universe
Yeah.
below the surface. And Scorpio is the sign of that.
Hmm.
Scorpio is intense, passionate. It's water, fixed water. So it's
Yeah.
very emotional and very passionate. I really appreciate the sign of Scorpio in that regard.
Yeah. I love how it's in gate 43, and you wouldn't
44.
imagine, or 44, you wouldn't imagine gate 44 in this intuitive splenic system,
Yeah.
this ability to tap into the intuitive personnel manager, to be someone that had the dark within the dark, or the deep within the deep, and the emotional expression um, that 44 would have. But when you fall into the connection of it, it kind of feels like I look to the gates before and after it, and so before it is the purpose. What is the purpose of my intuitive movement? Why am I alive here? And so the next one is, who am I here to be alive with? It is that emotional expression of, who are we on this ride together with? Once that intuition knows who it is, to be able to connect and share with that other person in a very deep uh scorpionic way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and as you're sharing, adding that scorpionic frequency to
Hmm.
that particular gate really sheds some new light on it. I
Hmm.
mean, Scorpio has the ability to see around the corner. There's
Yeah,
almost a psychic attunement.
right.
They can see what's hidden in the dark, right? There's a frequency to connect with the hidden truths.
Hmm.
And so that's part of the theme of this whole month for
Yeah.
us. I mean, these new
Yeah.
moons are like the first chapter in the month. They're a wonderful time for setting intentions.
Yeah.
And I think part of the overriding theme I'm feeling for this Scorpio new moon is to be present to what comes to light that was
Yeah.
not known before,
Hmm.
right? Things could be shadow things, could be uncomfortable things, or otherwise, but to really be aware because there's almost during this season a liminal space between
Hmm.
this world and the other world,
Hmm.
or this world and the other underworld, because Scorpio is ruled by not only Mars in ancient astrology, but also the modern day ruler is Pluto. And
Hmm.
Pluto is the god of the underworld. It's
Right.
about death, rebirth, transformation. In Scorpio, we also add the word sex and finances because
Right.
it has to do with money and things done behind closed doors.
Right.
So there's a real spectrum here between power, sort of in a shadow side, but then
Mhm.
on the higher octave, which is very generous and giving. And Scorpios, people that have their sun sign, can be incredibly the best friends you've ever
Right.
had.
Right.
We just don't want to make them mad because they know where our own dirt is.
Right.
But just kind of sharing the flavor of Scorpio to recognize that this lunar cycle could have tremendous transformative breakthroughs if someone has something going on in their
Yeah.
life that they're looking for like that.
And specifically in relationships,
Hmm.
because of the season that we are in.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so that brings us to um, the next part.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about a couple of the other major aspects
Mhm.
that are adding to the frequency of this new moon. And again, the entire lunar cycle will be engaged in. And what it is that Pluto and Mars are opposite each other.
Mhm.
And I want to break this down a little bit because this is a huge part of what's going on, not only in the world right now, but also, of course, individually. Pluto is about to exit the sign of Capricorn on November 19th and move into Aquarius
Right.
for good. Now, Pluto dipped its toes into Aquarius a couple times already and went retrograde. But when Pluto crosses over into Aquarius now, it's not going to come back to Capricorn for over 240 years. So it's sort of the last chapter of what Pluto's been doing in Capricorn since 2008. And Pluto shows us the underbelly of
Mhm.
these signs. It provides a frequency where the shadow can become aware.
Mhm.
And so what we may be seeing is that certain structures, and I'm thinking more on a world level when we think about our governments and banking and finance institutions, where there's a lot of turmoil in all of our world structures right now because they don't seem to be serving the people that created them
Right.
anymore. But if we take this to an individual level, which is where we like to talk about
Yeah.
it, we can see this in our own lives. Certain structures that may have been part of our life for a very long time, whether
Mhm.
from family of origin or long-term relationships, there's certain patterns that we may have been in that we have been sensing are not working for us.
Mhm.
And this particular lunation would be perfectly suited for really digging into that,
Right.
allowing ourselves to look under the carpet, to raise the veil, to allow the hidden to become visible
Mhm.
so that we can see what can we let go that's no longer serving us.
Right.
It's, mhm.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just
Yeah.
wanted to kind of wrap up that opposition because that's Pluto leaving Aquarius. And
Right.
again, that's a big deal in and of itself. And what's happening is Mars on the other side of the wheel in the sign of Cancer, also at 29 degrees, as he's moving from Cancer into Leo, they're forming this opposition will be perfect or exact on Sunday. Well, this new moon is on Friday.
Right.
So essentially it is at its zenith of frequency. Now, Mars in Cancer is in its fall, but it doesn't mean that it has any less strength.
Right.
It's just that Mars has a bit more of a defensive aggression here, and it's a sign of Cancer. So Mars is ready to defend what it feels its inner security is, its inner emotional security, or its family, or its mother. But it's in this watery sign of our
Mhm.
internal world. And so this opposition is creating this rather volatile dynamic where we may feel things that are coming up in our relationships may be very stimulating,
Right.
and our Mars frequency we're getting from the transit may want us to fight back.
I love how you used the human design keynotes. We're
Mhm.
talking about, you said stimulation and limitation, and 60 is where Pluto is. And this is
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I interrupted you. I thought you meant
okay.
Mars. Go
Yeah,
ahead. You're
no,
on it.
Pluto.
You're
No, yeah.
on.
60 is where Pluto is, and
Yeah.
it's making its third pass, as you mentioned.
Hmm.
And so it has me stimulated to feel the birthing process coming to a completion. There is an ability now for something potentially to come out, and 56 in Mars can defend it by uh, divine defense, meaning it just allows the expression of itself to not allow abandonment
Hmm.
which will defend itself in whatever way it needs to without destroying relationships or destroying relationships if that's what's needed. But 56 in this stimulating way is what I feel like it's able with, and when we get to Chiron, we'll be able to see that connection. But I think that we're able to really restory. 56 is the storyteller.
Hmm.
So how are we defending or restoring? The only defense that's needed is truth. And so as long as we're telling the right story about ourselves, we are using the language that we have to correctly point to the energy that we feel in the shadow and in the light. I think that that is the defense that we need. So it doesn't have to be the defense that we are taught, like anger and violence and aggression. It doesn't have to be, although it could be
Hmm.
with no judgment, but it also could be just a Kali type of defense that just says no and tells a different story.
Ah, I thought you were describing that so beautifully. Absolutely. This Pluto offering its frequency of transformation in the
Mhm.
archetype of limitations,
Mhm.
right? How do we uh, reframe what has been our vulnerability or weakness or limitation and alchemize that to have the breakthrough to move through? And I think that Mars you were describing in 56 so accurately. I think we can really listen to the conversations this
Mhm.
month. They may be heated with that Mars there, but how that story is coming out,
Yeah.
is it really matching our internal truth and process of
Right.
transformation?
And if it does, the heat that comes out is a heat through a regulated body, which is needed to create change.
Hmm.
So it doesn't, we don't have to judge as long as it's coming from a place of truth in your body, it is the right defense.
Hmm. Yeah, really nice. So we wanted to start with that particular aspect because that really is the crucible
Mm-hmm.
here, I think,
Mm-hmm.
of what's being offered. Again, it's an extra big deal because Pluto is in its final chapter of Capricorn
Mm-hmm.
that's really allowing us to examine these structures that have formed our personal lives and what changes want to be made or let go or kept on.
Right.
Now, in addition to that Mars Pluto opposition, we also have a grand water trine in the chart, and that's formed by Mercury in Scorpio. Mercury is in gate 14. It's Mercury is trine to Neptune in Pisces in gate 36, and that both of those planets are also trining Mars, which we were just talking
Mm-hmm.
about, at the 29th degree of Cancer, also gate 56. So with this grand water trine, we can certainly say that it's could be very emotional,
Mm-hmm.
right?
With Neptune in 36 for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that Neptune, so here's what I find interesting is Mercury being in Scorpio, where the
Mm-hmm.
new moon is taking place, is also ruled by the planet Pluto. So Pluto has some real priority in this frequency here. And Mercury certainly is uh, very helpful at communicating with Pluto. He's the
Mm-hmm.
messenger. He's the god. He can travel between the underworld and the upper world. So, the whatever Pluto has to share with us, I feel like it can be easily communicated by Mercury,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's trying that Neptune, which is giving it sort of this watery, fuzzy world. It
Mm-hmm.
kind of, Neptune always makes things a little less clear, but what it does do is help us tap into our spirituality
Right.
or mysticism. And it's also about limitlessness. So, again, I think whatever breakthroughs someone may have this lunar month, they're big and they're
Yeah.
pervasive and they can go on forever the way Neptune does. And that we mentioned already, it's got that Mars energy
Mm-hmm.
fueling that watery trine.
Yeah. And if we bring the gates into consideration, this vitality, this energy, this
Mm.
14 in Mercury that fuels the energy of direction or purpose in the magnetic monopole in gate two.
Mm.
It's not just fueling, it's not fueling anything but proper direction of self.
Mhm.
And so with Mercury and Neptune trine, it feels like in that watery world, the body again is giving the sign of vitality. What is vital? What can be vital when it talks to Pluto and this limitation? Where does my vitality live
Mhm.
in the structures that exist? And where does it not live in the
Mhm.
structures that
Yeah.
exist? And so being able to be in that watery chaos of the world, 36 just reminds me of the world, like
Mm.
the way the world is
Yeah.
36.
Yeah.
And so finding myself, my vitality, my new story.
Yeah.
Uh,
Really nice. Really appreciate how you keynoted that all together. And then there's one final aspect we wanted to bring into this story, which is that Jupiter in Gemini in gate 45 in the body graph is partile sextile, meaning it's the same degree. So it's a very tight aspect. Jupiter is sextile to Chiron in Aries, which has retrograded back now to gate 51,
Mhm.
line 6. Now, what's interesting
Mhm.
about that detail is that it's gate 51 where the total solar eclipse in April happened.
Right.
And that was a big deal, not only from the actual visual event in the North America, everybody got to see, most people got to see a little bit, a lot of people got to see that
Yeah.
solar eclipse, but it was in gate 51, right?
Right.
And it was really shocking us into some invitation to be initiated
Yeah.
into a healing process. Now we're all these months later into November 1st, and Chiron, after moving forward, is moving backward over that same gate and
Hmm.
line that that eclipse happened in. So that really ties that timeline together for anything you had going on back that was in April. But the fact that it's sextile to Jupiter in this positive,
Hmm.
free flowing, supportive aspect, bringing the expansive quality of Jupiter into the healing process of the wounded healer.
With Gate 45, this voice of, I want to use the word educator here. So, educating in relationship, again, we're talking about the relationships, being able to use language to guide this relating into a place that is of awakening to our wounding and the healing that we've discovered through this year from April to now.
Yeah.
Where does our capacity to exist within the limitations that we've created already in this relationship? Where can I still exist here?
Yeah.
And where can we tell a new story about different places that we can exist that are more resourceful, more and have us both resourced as our individuated self?
Oh, wow. I'm hearing such great opportunity
Yeah.
and everything that you're sharing. And I feel that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it's a great invitation for all of us to have the bravery in 56 to um be or excuse me, the bravery in 51. I'm sorry that I
Yeah.
was thinking 51-6. The bravery in 51 to let that whatever that little, I was calling it in class the other day, that little blossom that has grown a little bit and we've cut it. Every time it's grown far enough to touch something that made us uncomfortable and we cut it. And then
Mhm.
it grows a little bit and we cut it. That the opportunity right now is to have the bravery to let it grow, let
Mhm.
the unknown awaken us all to what the truth of you is.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, really beautifully shared. And also what it stimulates in me looking at the body graph is that we do have the channel of the transmitter
right.
because the new moon is taking place in gate 44,
Hmm.
and we have Venus in Sagittarius in gate 26. So we have that tribal channel of surrender called the channel of the transmitter
Yeah,
as a tribal, as well as the Jupiter you mentioned in gate 45.
yeah.
So we can get this sense of family, tribe, support. I feel like any individual work that someone may be able to do in regards to moving past these limitations,
Yeah.
letting things go that are no longer serving them, it's going to have long lasting impacts as
Mhm.
well as very supportive impacts to those around them.
Well, and that being said, 2644, the channel of the transmitter does use language in a way that changes the cellular structure of the one receiving it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is, sometimes we have a hard time being, some people have a hard time being heard one way or the other. Everyone has their opportunity in relationships to be the one that is not being heard.
Mm-hmm.
And this 2644 gives us all the opportunity to be heard in a way that the other can hear you
Mm-hmm.
differently than we have had before, it
Yeah.
seems. And it seems it brings us all the way back to the new moon in 44, in being intuitive, being in touch with your body's wisdom to know who you're transmitting
Mm-hmm.
the proper message to. What is the right message? It's not for everybody just because
Mm-hmm.
it's alive in you. Take it from a transmitter.
Yeah.
Just because it's alive in you doesn't mean it's for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so in our relationships, we get to hone back into that um, intuitive and emotional knowing in our body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I really appreciate everything you're sharing about the body because I really think that's where we want to be grounded and centered this month. It
Mm.
is passionate, it is intense, That Mars Pluto, that's the cautionary tale that it can have a lot of value,
Mhm.
but it can also, in the outer world, there can be a lot of triggering. So I
Yeah.
think being able to regulate, really be connected to the motions, which
Mhm.
we have the opportunity. It's a grand water trine here, to really, yeah, be connected, grounded,
Yeah.
and listen to our stories, listen to what others are saying, and
Yeah.
see what the ultimate growth of healing for our own message is.
Yeah. Listen to what the 36 of all around you dimension is saying to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
guys so much for listening.